Chapter 1. A Child. Between Two Destinies. Our story begins around 428 BCE in the golden city of Athens, a metropolis unlike any other in the ancient Mediterranean. Athens thrived as a center of intellectual pursuit, artistic achievement, military prowess, and political innovation. Yet beneath its cultured surface lay constant tension, a place where ideals frequently surrendered to ambition. The child who would become known as one of history's most influential philosophers entered a world of privilege and expectation. His father descended from ancient Athenian nobility, while his mother traced her lineage to legendary lawmakers. From his earliest days, he lived surrounded by political discourse, material comfort, and towering expectations. Unlike typical children of privilege who accepted their advantages without question, this young boy possessed an unusual quality. He questioned everything. He received instruction from Athens' finest educators in music, physical training, poetry, and mathematical reasoning. But memorization never satisfied him. He constantly probed beneath surface answers, seeking deeper understanding. When his tutors taught him that justice meant following established laws, he would immediately challenge them. But suppose those laws themselves are unjust, does obedience to them still constitute justice? Though barely past childhood, he already thought with philosophical depth that astonished his teachers. His gifts in language, composition, and debate emerged early. Initially, he dreamed of becoming a celebrated dramatist. He composed verses and theatrical works, even preparing entries for public competitions. But destiny had different plans. Athens during his youth was far from peaceful. The city found itself locked in the devastating Peloponnesian conflict with Sparta, a brutal war lasting nearly 3 decades that ultimately shattered Athenian society. The democratic system that had been Athens' pride began crumbling. Leadership grew corrupt, citizens lived in fear, and justice became whatever those in power declared it to be. Witnessing this decay profoundly affected the young thinker. His faith in conventional government, politicians, and supposed leaders eroded. Through this disillusionment came a powerful realization: mere learning proves insufficient. Political authority alone cannot create goodness. Society requires something more fundamental. It needs philosophical understanding. This insight would shape everything that followed. Chapter 2. The Meeting That Changed. Everything around age 20. He encountered the figure who would transform his entire trajectory. This was a peculiar man who walked Athens' streets without shoes, indifferent to wealth or appearance, never recording his thoughts in writing. Yet his intellectual power was undeniable. This remarkable teacher would approach citizens, politicians, educators, soldiers, and pose seemingly simple questions. What exactly is justice? How do we define courage? What constitutes truth? When people answered confidently, he would probe deeper with additional questions until they recognized the shakiness of their own understanding. His goal wasn't to humiliate, but to awaken, to demonstrate that genuine wisdom begins with acknowledging one's ignorance. The young aristocrat was captivated. He became a devoted student, following his teacher constantly, absorbing every lesson and later becoming the voice that would preserve these teachings for posterity. After this fateful meeting, he abandoned his theatrical ambitions, reportedly destroying his early creative works. He later reflected that this teacher made him truly understand the limits of his knowledge. Fame and power ceased to interest him. Truth became his only pursuit. At that moment, though he couldn't have known it, the foundations of Western philosophy began to form, not through military conquest or royal decree, but through a young man brave enough to question everything. The student spent years learning not just ideas but methods of thinking. His teacher would engage people in public spaces, and the student observed how apparent wisdom collapsed under careful questioning. These weren't merely intellectual exercises, they were demonstrations that people rarely examined their own beliefs critically. The student began recording these encounters, not as exact transcripts but as philosophical dialogues, conversations between minds exploring fundamental questions. Unknowingly, he was creating texts that would be studied for millennia to come. Chapter 3. The Tragedy That Sparked a Mission in 399 BCE, when the student had reached his late 20s, catastrophe struck. His beloved teacher faced criminal charges, corrupting young citizens and disrespecting traditional religious beliefs. The true reason for prosecution was more sinister. This teacher threatened the powerful by encouraging people to think independently and question authority. Those in power despised being challenged. The student watched in horror and fury as his mentor stood calmly before judges, refusing to apologize or cease his philosophical questioning. The teacher declared he would rather die than abandon the pursuit of truth. He understood truth's price and accepted it willingly. The court sentenced him to death by poison, a slow, agonizing execution. The student witnessed those final moments, later describing how his teacher drank the fatal cup with composure, lay down peacefully, and gradually lost sensation in his limbs until the poison reached his heart. But there were no tears, no cries of anguish. Instead, his teacher smiled and spoke of the soul's immortality, declaring death merely a transition, not an ending. This scene remained forever seared in the student's consciousness. That calmness, that courage, that ultimate sacrifice for principle. The tragedy didn't merely wound him, it completely rebuilt his purpose. That day he made a silent oath: though the world might silence this teacher's voice in life, he would ensure it echoed throughout history. This promise literally changed the course of human civilization. Chapter 4. The years of wandering and learning Athens became unsafe for those associated with the executed philosopher. The student was heartbroken and angry, but he recognized an essential truth: remaining would accomplish nothing except his own destruction. He needed to depart, not to escape, but to prepare himself for something greater. For approximately 12 years, he traveled throughout the ancient world, accumulating wisdom from diverse cultures. In Egypt, he studied geometry, mathematics, and spiritual sciences from priestly scholars who possessed knowledge dating back millennia. In southern Italy and Sicily, he encountered followers of Pythagoras, who believed the entire cosmos operated according to mathematical principles and harmonic relationships. Throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, he explored astronomy, political theory, and numerous other disciplines. This wasn't leisurely tourism, it was intensive intellectual training. He assembled his worldview piece by carefully examined piece, connecting insights from vastly different traditions. During this period, he began writing philosophical dialogues, texts where characters debate profound questions. What constitutes justice? How should we understand love? What makes a life good? What principles should govern society? Rather than simply providing answers, he crafted works that made readers think deeply for themselves. The follower who once simply listened was becoming a master in his own right. Chapter 5. Building the first university around 387 BCE. After more than a decade abroad, he returned to Athens fundamentally changed. He had studied with mystics, mathematicians, and philosophers across the Mediterranean world. Now he was prepared to create something unprecedented. He acquired property outside the city in a grove associated with a mythical hero. There he established a school, but not just any educational institution. This was the Academy, widely considered the Western world's first true university. Its purpose was revolutionary, not teaching people what to think, but how to think. There were no formal degrees, no grades, no rigid textbooks, only minds engaging, challenging, and growing together. Students studied philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, ethics, politics, logic, and metaphysics. Scholars came from across Greece and beyond. The Academy became a beacon of knowledge that operated for over 9 centuries, long outlasting its founder. This institution represented more than education. It was his response to ignorance, his answer to his teacher's unjust death, his gift to future generations. During these years, he composed his most celebrated works, including his vision of an ideal society, deep explorations of love and beauty, defenses of philosophical inquiry, and examinations of the cosmos's origins. He used character-driven dialogues rather than dry lectures, making philosophy accessible and engaging. Through his writings, he planted seeds of curiosity, logical reasoning, and healthy skepticism toward blind belief in every reader's mind. Chapter 6. The Teacher of Teachers. The Academy wasn't organized like modern schools. Teaching happened primarily outdoors under olive trees, with students gathered in circles on grass or seated on simple benches. Small structures housed scrolls and provided shelter, but most learning occurred in open air through words, questions, and debate. The goal transcended passing examinations. It aimed to develop the soul itself. The founder would walk slowly among students, sometimes speaking, often simply posing questions, and allowing students to debate each other. The Academy became a community where thinking constituted a way of life. One day, A 17-year-old arrived from northern Greece, a sharp, restless, intellectually hungry young man who had lost his parents early. He came from a rougher, more practical region far from Athens' refinement. This teenager entered the academy and remained for 2 decades, becoming the founder's most brilliant student. The master recognized extraordinary potential in him. The young man absorbed everything: ethics, logic, mathematics, biology, politics, while constantly questioning, documenting, and developing his own ideas. The academy became a forge, and this student emerged as one of its finest creations. Later, he would tutor Alexander of Macedon, who would conquer vast territories across 3 continents. Thus, the academy indirectly shaped not just individual minds, but entire empires. The master had created a chain reaction of influence that would ripple through history. One teacher had inspired him. He trained this brilliant student. That student shaped a future conqueror. And that conqueror spread Hellenic ideas, culture, and philosophy across the known world. Though the founder never ruled a city, commanded armies, or wore a crown, his thoughts traveled farther than any soldier could march. Chapter 7. The final years and lasting vision. While continuing to teach, the founder wrote prolifically. During or after establishing the academy, he produced numerous groundbreaking dialogues, each opening new doors of understanding. These works explored ideal governance, the nature of love, the soul's character, rhetoric's dangers, inspiration's sources, and practical legal systems. These weren't dry academic texts. They read like theatrical performances, filled with memorable characters, stories, and quotable insights. Even today, people quote his ideas without realizing their origin. Every dialogue also served as an act of preservation, ensuring his teacher's spirit continued challenging readers across generations. Though he loved teaching, he also attempted applying his ideas to actual governments. He made several journeys to Sicily, hoping to guide a young ruler toward philosophical leadership. But reality proved more complex than theory. The court was filled with intrigue, jealousy, and danger. The ruler proved unready for deep philosophy, and the founder himself faced accusations and was briefly held against his will. Though this practical experiment failed, he didn't abandon his vision of just society. He returned to Athens and poured renewed energy into teaching and writing. During these years, he developed his most famous philosophical theory, the concept that everything we perceive in the physical world represents merely shadows or copies of perfect, eternal forms existing beyond our senses. Like prisoners seeing only shadows on cave walls, most people perceive only appearances. The philosopher turns toward the light, glimpsing true reality. This idea profoundly influenced not just philosophy but religion, art, and science for centuries, teaching people to look beyond surface appearances and search for deeper principles. As decades passed, the founder became more than a teacher. He evolved into a living symbol. His beard grew white, his voice softened, but when he spoke, the entire academy listened. He was no longer simply explaining his teacher's ideas. He had established his own philosophical identity. Chapter 8. The Great Work and Final Days. Many consider the founder's vision of ideal society his most important contribution. But in his later years, he undertook something even more ambitious, a massive, detailed work that consumed years of effort. Unlike his earlier idealistic vision, this final project was intensely practical. A comprehensive blueprint for an actual city with real laws, functioning systems, genuine education, and concrete rules for daily life. He now understood that ideas alone couldn't transform the world. They required application. This work discussed children's education, family structure, anti-corruption laws, art and music's role in character development, and the punishments and rewards that shape moral citizens. This wasn't abstract theory, but a real model for real civilization. He worked on this monumental project until life's very end, demonstrating he wasn't fleeing from politics but confronting it with his sharpest weapon, his mind. Meanwhile, his brilliant former student was developing his own philosophical direction. While deeply respecting his teacher, the student questioned the theory that perfect forms exist beyond our world, finding it too mystical and abstract. He preferred studying observable, measurable phenomena, focusing on logic, biology, science, and systematic classification. This created a philosophical division that would shape Western thought for centuries. One vision focused on eternal truths beyond appearances, the other on organizing practical reality. Yet both approaches proved necessary. Both were brilliant, and both emerged from the same garden of thought. As he entered his late 70s and early 80s, the founder spent more time in quiet reflection but never stopped teaching. He would still sit beneath olive trees, listening to young students debate, smiling when they asked questions he once posed to his own teacher. He was no longer trying to prove anything, simply guiding like a lighthouse directing ships to shore. Visitors traveled from distant lands just to hear his voice. For them, he represented not just a man, but a mind made manifest. His body aged, but his intellect remained sharp. He continued working on his final great text until the very end. Chapter 9. The Transition and the Beginning. He passed from this world around 347 BCE, likely at age 80 or 81. The exact circumstances weren't recorded with great detail. There were no grand state funerals or elaborate ceremonies. He departed quietly in Athens, the city of his birth, but in truth, he didn't die. Because he was never merely a physical being, he was an idea. An idea that truth matters even at the cost of one's life, that thinking deeply surpasses speaking loudly, that education represents the highest form of justice, that a mind trained to think critically poses greater power than any army. He left behind questions rather than dogma. He left behind conversations rather than commandments. He left behind a school that trained free thinkers. And this is how his ideas began living a secret second life. Long after his mortal form returned to Earth, his nephew assumed leadership of the academy, continuing the mission of teaching philosophy, mathematics, ethics, and politics. The academy remained a protected space where weapons were forbidden and truth mattered more than power. Generation after generation, brilliant minds continued entering its gates. Chapter 10. The Dangerous Journey Across Time. For centuries, the academy survived governmental changes, urban destruction, and shifting rulers. But then his ideas began a perilous journey across the world. As Rome rose to power, it absorbed much Greek culture, art, architecture, literature, and philosophy. However, Romans favored practical action over abstract thought. The founder's work didn't spread quickly in early Roman society, seen as too complex and theoretical, but some Roman intellectuals began reading and respecting his work, translating portions and introducing his ideas to Roman education. Then came a major challenge. As Christianity grew dominant in the Roman Empire, many religious leaders viewed Greek philosophy as dangerous, something that questioned faith and obedience. Books burned, schools closed. In 529 CE, an emperor officially shut down the academy after 900 years of continuous operation. It seemed like a final tragedy. Students were expelled, some fled to Persia, many vanished. It appeared the founder's legacy had finally ended. But truth refuses to die so easily. Chapter 11. The Secret Preservation. Though the academy closed, the founder's dialogues had already been hand-copied countless times. These delicate scrolls, written in ink on parchment or papyrus, were carried by monks, hidden in monasteries, preserved in remote libraries, or even buried underground for protection. Some copies traveled to Byzantium. Others reached the Islamic world, where scholars translated them into Arabic. During the Islamic Golden Age, roughly the 8th through 12th centuries, Muslim philosophers deeply studied these ancient texts. In cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba, brilliant thinkers explored these ideas alongside other Greek philosophy. The founder's writings were translated, discussed, and challenged in the Middle East, while Europe languished in intellectual darkness. His spirit survived through Arabic scholars in lands far from Athens. Chapter 12. The Great Return Fast Forward to the 15th Century. Europe began awakening in what we call the Renaissance, a period when artists, scientists, and writers looked backward to ancient texts for inspiration. This was the era of Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Galileo, and they discovered the ancient philosopher. Thanks to preserved Arabic translations and remaining Greek copies, his dialogues returned to Europe, now reproducible through the revolutionary printing press. An Italian priest and scholar translated the works into Latin and established a new academy inspired by the original. The ancient philosopher was back, not just as a historical figure, but as a source of illumination in a world that had forgotten how to think. Deeply, his return during the Renaissance helped ignite intellectual fire across Europe. Artists studied beauty and form through his concepts. Scientists used his belief in abstract truth to guide experimentation. Political thinkers read his vision of society and imagined better worlds. His idea that truth exists beyond appearances helped people question kings, priests, and old beliefs. Though he had lived over 18 centuries earlier, he became a revolutionary force, a silent partner to Copernicus, Descartes, Newton, and later Einstein. Because they all shared his conviction, reality contains more than what we immediately perceive. Look deeper. Ask better questions. Chapter 13. The Modern Echo During Europe's Age of Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th centuries. An Era of Reason. Science and political revolution, philosophers continued reading the ancient texts. They used these ideas to rethink government, freedom, morality, and justice. Even revolutionary political theorists studied his vision of ideal society. In the modern era, professors, psychologists, teachers, and spiritual seekers continue returning to these texts again and again, seeking answers to existence's hardest questions. Why this enduring relevance? Because the ancient philosopher wasn't primarily a man of answers, he was a man of questions. And humanity never runs out of questions. Today, over 25 complete dialogues survive, preserved almost entirely intact. These works are taught in more than 90 countries, in hundreds of universities, translated into over 40 languages and available freely online. They form part of humanity's greatest intellectual treasury. Chapter 14. The Eternal Flame. Who was this philosopher, really? He never ruled an empire, never led an army, never wrote for fame or political power. He didn't believe in speaking to win arguments. He believed in speaking to awaken consciousness. He wasn't a prophet, warrior, or monarch. But he was something even rarer, a man who chose truth above everything else. From the moment he met his teacher, he exchanged comfort for questions, applause for silence, luxury for logic, status for understanding. He was a mind aflame, and that fire still burns. In his final years, he wrote not just about governments and societies, but about the soul itself. He believed something that shocked many contemporaries, that the soul is eternal, that death isn't an ending, that our bodies are merely temporary vessels, that true knowledge comes from the soul remembering what it already understands. This was revolutionary thinking. Most people viewed death as absolute finality. He saw it as transformation, a return home. In one dialogue, he describes his teacher's final moments, conveying this truth through that scene. The soul resembles a bird trapped in a cage. Death isn't loss, it's liberation. In another work, he discusses love not merely as attraction between people, but as a spiritual ladder. At the bottom lies physical attraction, then intellectual connection, then appreciation of beauty itself, and finally, love of truth. In his worldview, authentic love is the desire to unite with eternal truth. He believed love powered growth and the soul was the traveler. Chapter 15. The living legacy. You might not realize it, but this ancient philosopher surrounds you. When you ask what is real, you say, I want to understand myself. You're following his path. When a teacher asks a student a question to stimulate thinking rather than simply providing answers, that's the method he preserved. He exists in our schools, our science, our psychology, our ethics, our spirituality, and even our films and stories. Consider movies that ask, what is real? What is illusion? What defines consciousness? That's his voice echoing across millennia. He taught us not what to think, but how to think, and that gift continues growing. Chapter 16. 7 Timeless Lessons for Today. Whether you're wealthy or struggling, young or elderly, just beginning to learn or already accomplished, this ancient philosopher offers 7 eternal lessons. First, master the art of learning before attempting to teach. He didn't become a master philosopher overnight. Initially, he was a silent listener who sat at his teacher's feet, watching, listening, and absorbing for years. He didn't interrupt or pretend to possess wisdom he lacked. He followed with genuine humility. Only after mastering how to learn did he establish his school, write his great works, and become one of history's most influential minds. The lesson: don't rush toward leadership. Learn deeply, observe carefully, absorb thoroughly. When the time arrives, you won't need to announce your wisdom, it will speak for itself. Second, Focus on the work itself, not recognition for it. He never obsessed over fame or titles. He never marketed himself or pursued celebrity. Others called him a great thinker because of what he actually accomplished. He taught daily, wrote constantly, and questioned continuously, but he didn't chase applause. The lesson: be content with simple roles: student, writer, teacher, creator. What matters is what you do, not what others call you. Third, take responsibility for your own happiness. He believed the soul must be trained and developed. He taught that genuine happiness doesn't come from external circumstances, but from inner balance. He essentially said, the person who makes their happiness dependent only on themselves has adopted the wisest approach to living well. Today we blame other people, jobs, economic conditions, or society. He tells us, stop blaming. Your soul possesses power. Your happiness is your responsibility. Fourth, work diligently to accomplish meaningful things. He spent decades writing, teaching, questioning, and building his school. He didn't rely on shortcuts. He believed the soul grows only through discipline and sustained effort. He understood that excellence isn't innate. It's a skill requiring practice. We don't act correctly because we're naturally excellent. We become excellent by consistently acting correctly. Don't wait until you feel ready. Start acting, start practicing, start doing. Hard work isn't optional. It's the path itself. Fifth, contribute to society as much as you're able. He believed we're all parts of a larger system, a community, a society, a civilization. He taught that a just person isn't merely good in isolation, but must be good for others. In his vision of ideal society, every person has a role. No role is more or less important, but every role must be performed with excellence. The lesson: help your society rise. Don't just exist, contribute meaningfully. Your skills, your voice, your values matter to the whole. Sixth, engage with governance or accept being ruled by inferior leaders. One of his most famous warnings, the price good people pay for not participating in politics, is being governed by worse people. He didn't mean everyone must become a politician. He meant don't remain silent, don't stay passive. Learn what's happening in your society, speak with reason, make informed choices, stay aware. If good people withdraw from civic decisions, bad people will fill the vacuum. Seventh, democracy requires educated citizens to function properly. He personally experienced his teacher's execution, a wise man killed by democratic vote. Ordinary citizens acting on fear and emotion without deep thought voted to end the life of Athens' wisest inhabitant. This taught him that democracy without education devolves into chaos. He believed in wisdom-guided leadership, not mere popularity contests. He envisioned a world where philosophical thinkers guide decisions, not simply the loudest voices. The lesson: freedom is powerful, but without knowledge, it becomes destructive. That's precisely why he created the Academy, to train minds before granting them power. Conclusion: the undying voice, this ancient philosopher never died. Not really. His physical form returned to earth, but his essence lives on in every question asked in pursuit of truth. In every classroom where teachers encourage students to think critically, in every person who refuses to accept comfortable lies over difficult truths. He taught us that one person armed with questions can change the world more effectively than armies with weapons. He showed us that real power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering ourselves. He demonstrated that the examined life, the life of constant questioning, learning, and growth, is the only life truly worth living. His voice echoes through 25 centuries, as clear and challenging today as when he first spoke in those olive groves outside Athens. He calls to each of us: wake up, think deeply, question everything, seek truth, develop your soul, contribute to your community. Never stop learning, whether you realize it or not. By engaging with these ideas, you've joined an unbroken chain of seekers that stretches back through the centuries, a golden thread connecting ancient Athens to the present moment, connecting that first academy to every place where people gather to think, learn, and grow together. The flame he lit still burns. And as long as there are curious minds, questioning hearts, and souls hungry for truth, it will never go out. His greatest lesson? You don't need to conquer nations to change the world. You don't need wealth or status or power. You need only the courage to think freely, question honestly, and seek truth relentlessly. That courage transformed a privileged Athenian boy into one of history's most influential minds. And that same courage lives within you, waiting to be awakened. This is the eternal gift of the philosopher. Not answers, but the courage to ask. Not certainty, but the wisdom to doubt. Not conclusions, but the journey toward understanding. And that journey never ends. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonne firosank.